I sat at my desk, staring at the stack of emails that had piled up while I was in back-to-back meetings all morning. My mind was elsewhere, though, as I listened to the distant murmur of voices from the conference room down the hall. The door creaked open, and I barely registered it, until Regina's voice rang out, cutting through the air with the sharpness of broken glass. "Zelda, come in here. Now." I paused, taking a breath. Regina had been my supervisor for almost 2 years, but her relationship with me had never been easy. To her, I was always too much, too empathetic, too focused on people over profits. I knew it, she knew it. But today, I had no idea what I was walking into. The conference room door swung open, and I stepped inside. The cold fluorescent lights overhead made everything feel harsh, too bright. Regina stood at the head of the table, her posture stiff and rigid, a smirk tugging at the corner of her lips. She was flanked by our entire team, more than 20 of my colleagues, all seated in their usual spots. I wasn't expecting the feeling of eyes on me, but there it was, like a weight pressing down on my chest. I barely managed a smile before I took the empty seat in front of Regina, unsure of what was going on. She didn't waste a moment. "Zelda," she began, her voice dripping with sarcasm, "let's review your work. I have to admit, it's been quite enlightening." My heart skipped. What was she talking about? With a dramatic flourish, Regina tapped the keyboard, her fingers moving with purpose. I watched as she opened the file I'd spent months putting together, a comprehensive audit of my work with clients. A year's worth of relationships, detailed conversations, and personal touch that had built bridges where others had burned them. She looked at me, then back at the screen, and with a single cruel motion, deleted the entire file. There it went, years of emails, notes, follow-up calls, and client interactions, reduced to nothing but a blinking cursor on an empty screen. The room fell deathly silent. My stomach churned, the hum of the air conditioner too loud in my ears. "I think we can all agree this is the kind of thing that doesn't belong here," Regina said, her eyes gleaming with something I couldn't quite place. "Pointless chatter. Nothing productive. Nothing that brings in business." The room was still quiet. I glanced at my colleagues, some of them looking away, others too uncomfortable to meet my eyes. No one said a word. I could feel their judgment, their thoughts swirling around me. Was this how it was always going to be? Invisible? Dismissed? I felt a tightness in my throat, but I didn't speak. I couldn't. My pride, my professional reputation, all of it was being stripped down in front of the people I'd worked with for years. But as the seconds ticked by, something inside me shifted. This wasn't just about my work being erased. It was about what had been erased. The heart of the company, the human connection that kept our clients coming back. And then, just as the silence threatened to swallow me whole, my phone buzzed. The moment I saw the name on the screen, a flood of realization hit me. I felt it in my chest. I excused myself, barely registering the murmurs of my colleagues as I stepped out into the hallway. The call connected. "Zelda." The voice on the other end was warm, professional. "We've been following your work for some time, and we'd like to offer you a position. A senior consultant role. We can offer you $500,000 a year, plus full creative freedom. What do you say?" The words were still sinking in when I turned back to the conference room door. Regina had just destroyed the very thing that had been holding our clients together, the thing that had made our company stand out. And now, without even thinking, I knew exactly what I had to do. "Send me the offer letter," I said, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. "And I'll sign it." 18 months earlier, I had been sitting in a cramped conference room, nervously tapping my pen against the wooden table. Crestwell Events, a mid-sized event management company, had taken me in as their new client care coordinator. The job title sounded innocuous enough, but I quickly realized it was more of a fixer-upper position than anything else. The company's reputation had taken a hit over the years. Their events were lackluster, their clients growing disillusioned with the robotic service they had come to expect. It wasn't just that they weren't meeting expectations, it was that they weren't connecting with people at all. Regina, my new boss, sat across from me, her eyes scanning the contract in front of her as she fiddled with a pen, her mind clearly elsewhere. She had made it clear from the start that she saw my position as emotional fluff, something to be tolerated rather than nurtured. She was all spreadsheets and budgets, numbers and bottom lines. People? Not her concern. Your role is simple, Regina had told me on my first day, her voice clipped. Manage the accounts. Make sure events run on time. And if you're feeling extra generous, maybe throw in a thank you note or two. But don't waste too much time on that. Clients care about efficiency, not friendships. I had nodded, but her words didn't sit right with me. Over the course of my first few weeks, I took a step back and observed. The company's past client care coordinators had treated clients like transactions. A quick email, a handshake at the door, a follow-up call that was more about ticking off boxes than about building lasting relationships. And as a result, clients were leaving, even the long-standing ones. That's when it hit me. They weren't just losing clients, they were losing trust. And trust? That was the one thing Regina didn't seem to value. So, I decided to try something else. I wasn't going to force it on anyone, but I would test the waters. The first thing I did was reach out to a few long-term clients. Not with a formal email or a standard phone call, but with something personal. A little note here, a text there. Nothing flashy. Just, hey, how's the family? Did you guys finally get around to that puppy adoption you were talking about? Or saw a picture of that wedding venue you mentioned. Looked stunning. Little gestures. Human gestures. And as expected, it worked. But Regina didn't notice. She didn't care. Every time I mentioned a conversation with a client or shared a personal story, she would roll her eyes, making it clear that my approach was inefficient. She would lecture me about professionalism and productivity. But her lectures didn't bother me anymore. What bothered me was seeing the change in our client retention rates. I had barely been at Cresswell for 3 months, and I was already seeing positive shifts. But Regina wasn't interested in that. Get back to work, she'd bark at me. Stop wasting time. Results come from numbers, not nonsense. It was a strange place to be. To have something working, to know it was working, and yet to have it dismissed like a piece of paper wadded up and thrown away. It was like fighting an invisible battle. But I was determined to win, even if Regina couldn't see it. The first few months were a delicate balance. I kept quiet about my methods, but little by little, the events started to show progress. Our clients were coming back, and new ones were recommending us. It wasn't huge, but it was noticeable. I didn't think about it at first. I didn't care about the credit. I was just doing my job, and it felt right. But one day, after a particularly successful event where I had worked tirelessly to make sure a longtime client had an unforgettable experience, I walked into the office to find Regina, of all people, grinning. Her smile didn't last long. It quickly turned into that smug, self-satisfied smirk of hers, the one she always wore when she was about to let me know how unprofessional my approach was. She opened her mouth to speak, but before she could, I beat her to it. You see the numbers? I asked, my voice quiet but steady. The retention rates are up. The feedback is overwhelmingly positive. She blinked, caught off guard for a moment. But then, as if to regain her composure, she tossed her head back, clearly unbothered. It's a fluke. Numbers don't lie. These relationships you're building? They won't pay the bills when the client cancels on us because we've overpromised. She leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, clearly waiting for me to take the bait. But I didn't. Instead, I smiled, though it felt more like a challenge. We'll see, won't we? It was a moment of quiet rebellion, but it felt powerful. I wasn't going to let Regina's vision limit what I knew to be true. People mattered. Relationships mattered. And I wasn't going to stop proving that. At Cresswell, I had found my footing, my own way of working. And as much as Regina tried to undermine it, I knew it would catch on. Even if I had to carry it all on my own, I wasn't going to let it slide. Not after Regina's harsh dismissal of everything I'd worked for. But what I wasn't prepared for was how quickly the clients started to take notice. They didn't just appreciate the small gestures. They craved them. It started with Bill from the Sterling Group. He had always been one of our more demanding clients, a little hard to please, but mostly because no one had ever really tried to get to know him. He was all business. No small talk. Just facts and figures. I knew that if I was going to make any headway with him, I had to show him I saw more than the dollar signs. One morning, I took a risk and decided to take a more personal approach. A few months prior, he had mentioned offhandedly that his mother had passed away. He had only said it in passing, not expecting anyone to remember, but I did. I followed up with a simple, "I know things have been tough lately, Bill. Just wanted to check in. How are you doing?" That afternoon, I got a reply. It was short, but it meant something. "Thanks, Zelda. Appreciate you reaching out. It's been rough, but I'm holding up." The next day, I sent him a card. It wasn't a company-branded, "We're sorry for your loss" card. It was just a simple, handwritten note that said, "I hope the coming days bring you peace. Take care, Bill." 2 weeks later, he called me personally, something that had never happened before. "I got your card," he said, his voice rough around the edges. "Look, I know we've always kept things business, but I gotta tell you, it meant a lot. More than you know." I was taken aback. That was the first time I realized how much a small act could make an impact. I hadn't expected any gratitude, let alone the open acknowledgement. But that conversation changed something for Bill. It changed the way he saw me, and the way he saw the company. Soon after that, his team started to request me specifically for events. They even asked for personalized follow-up calls. Business started to pick up, and the requests came in more frequently. It wasn't just Bill. Over the next few months, I started remembering little details from all my clients. I'd hear about a wedding anniversary, or a child's graduation, and I'd follow up with a quick message. "Congrats on the wedding anniversary, Jane. Hope it's a special day for you both." Or, "I remember you saying you were starting a new project at work. How's that going?" It didn't take long before the calls started coming in. And with each call, a client would ask for me specifically. They wanted to know how I was doing, how my life was. It wasn't just business anymore. Regina didn't see it that way. She scoffed every time I told her about a new personal connection. "Don't waste time chatting," she'd tell me. "People don't need a friend. They need an event coordinator." But the numbers were speaking for themselves. Client retention started to soar. Bookings increased. And most importantly, the clients felt like they mattered. Like they weren't just a number in a spreadsheet. When I shared these results with Regina, she dismissed them, attributing the improvement to everything but my approach. "It's just a phase, Zelda," she said. "You're distracting yourself with this nonsense. The clients will fall away when they realize they can't get the service they really need from you." But deep down, I knew I was doing something right. I was taking the time to listen, to remember, and to care. And the clients were responding to it. One afternoon, after a particularly successful meeting with a new client, I walked back to my desk and found an email from my team lead, Steve. His subject line read, "What's your secret?" Curious, I opened the email. "Zelda, I've noticed that every time you take on a client, they seem to stick around. Your personal follow-ups are getting rave reviews. What's your approach? We could use some of that magic over here." I smiled to myself. Finally, someone had noticed. I responded to Steve's email, outlining my methods, how I'd shifted the focus from transactional to relational, how I paid attention to what mattered to the clients beyond the event itself. Steve's reply was almost immediate. "Wow, that's amazing. Keep it up. I think we could learn a lot from you." It was a small victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. Slowly, the team began to follow my lead. Small gestures became standard. A personalized email here, a handwritten note there. It wasn't just about the work. It was about creating an experience that made the clients feel seen and valued. And despite Regina's objections, I began to see the results. The more I invested in people, the more they invested in Crestwell. Even if she didn't understand, I was building something that worked. The annual strategy review was something we all dreaded, but I knew it was coming. It was the one time of year when everyone was forced to face the reality of how the company was doing, and how their individual contributions measured up. In the weeks leading up to it, I had been working hard to maintain the momentum we'd built with our clients. New contracts were flowing in, and client retention was at an all-time high. Despite Regina's constant dismissals of my methods, I felt like I had finally proven my worth. That morning, I sat nervously at my desk, reviewing the latest numbers and preparing my talking points. I couldn't help but feel a mixture of excitement and anxiety. This was my chance to show that my approach, personal connections with clients, wasn't just fluff as Regina called it, but a legitimate strategy that produced tangible results. The meeting started promptly at 9 a.m. The usual faces were present. Regina, of course, sitting at the head of the table, flanked by the CEO, Tim, and several department heads. I sat quietly in my seat, waiting for my turn. Regina began the meeting with her usual briskness, moving quickly through the departments, ticking off accomplishments and goals. But when it came to me, there was a noticeable shift. I had been working hard to show positive results, but Regina wasn't about to let me walk away with all the glory. Zelda, Regina said, her voice stiff. Let's talk about your approach to client relations. Her eyes flicked to the CEO as if preparing to lay down the law. I nodded, fully prepared. As you know, I've been focusing on creating deeper connections with our clients, rather than just transactional interactions. I believe it's been. Let me stop you right there, Regina interjected, her lips curling into a thin, almost smug smile. We've seen some positive results, sure. But let's talk about what's actually been happening behind the scenes. Before I could respond, she clicked a button on her laptop, and the projector screen flickered to life. I watched stunned, as she pulled up a massive spreadsheet of all the communication logs I had meticulously tracked over the past year. Everything from follow-up emails to personalized notes to phone calls. Each entry was detailed, and I had spent countless hours ensuring that every client interaction was logged accurately. This, she began, tapping the screen with her pointer, is what you've been doing. Her voice was cold, dismissive. Pointless chatter, wasting time on niceties instead of getting to the point. The real work. The work that brings in contracts. The room was silent. My heart was pounding in my chest. I knew exactly what she was doing. She was using my audit, the one I'd worked so hard on, as a weapon to discredit me. My clients, my efforts, everything I'd worked for. She was dismissing it as insignificant. I've asked for results, Zelda, Regina continued, her voice rising just enough to make everyone in the room lean forward. And I don't see results here. What I see is a lot of unnecessary fluff. We don't have time for fluff in this industry. The tension in the room was palpable. Tim, the CEO, shifted uncomfortably in his seat, but he didn't say anything. Regina was too powerful, too entrenched in her position. And as she continued to lecture me about professionalism, I felt every ounce of my effort and passion being undermined. I wanted to stand up, to scream that she didn't understand. But I didn't. I stayed silent, staring at the screen, feeling the humiliation wash over me. Regina was making it seem like I was the problem, like I had failed. And then, just when I thought it couldn't get worse, she clicked a few more times, and the spreadsheet was replaced by an email. The email that I had sent to every client as a follow-up after a particularly challenging event. The one where I'd personally thanked them for their patience and emphasized how much we appreciated their business. Look at this, Regina said, her voice dripping with disdain. We don't need personal messages like this. We need contracts signed. We need results. This is unprofessional. I felt like the floor was falling out beneath me. My cheeks burned as I glanced around the room. No one was speaking. Everyone was waiting. I had spent weeks crafting that email, making sure every word was thoughtful and sincere. It wasn't just an email. It was me, pouring my energy into something that could make a real difference in how our clients felt about us. And now, Regina was reducing it to a joke. And that's when I realized. Regina wasn't interested in results. She wasn't interested in relationships. She was interested in control. In maintaining her position as the efficient leader of the company, no matter the cost. Then, as if to add salt to the wound, Regina clicked a button, and the screen went black. She turned to me, a smile curling on her lips. So here's what I need from you, Zelda. I want you to clean up this audit. We'll focus on the numbers, not your relationships. And if you can show me a few more contracts coming in from your chatter, maybe I'll reconsider my approach. But until then, I'm going to need something more substantial. Her words hung in the air, and I could feel the weight of them in my chest. What she was asking wasn't just unreasonable, it was impossible. She wanted me to completely erase everything I had worked for. I wanted to say something, to fight back, but the words wouldn't come. All I could do was nod and pretend that I agreed with her, that I was going to take her orders and do exactly what she wanted. But deep down, I knew something had changed. Regina had just set the stage for her own downfall. And as the meeting wrapped up and everyone filed out, leaving me alone with my shattered pride, I looked down at my phone. The new email notification from a rival consulting firm flashed on the screen. It was an offer. $500,000 and full creative freedom. My fingers hovered over the screen. Was this it? Was this the moment I'd been waiting for? The perfect chance to show Regina, and everyone else, that people mattered more than spreadsheets? Without thinking, I hit reply. I accept. I typed, my fingers steady. The next morning, I walked into the office feeling like I was in a daze. It wasn't even 9 a.m., and already, I could sense the shift in the air. My phone buzzed with the usual texts and emails, but I barely noticed them. My mind was still swirling from the meeting yesterday. Regina's dismissal of everything I had worked for, everything that had actually made a difference for our clients, was hard to shake. I kept thinking about her smug look as she deleted my audit, erasing the evidence of my dedication in front of the whole team. She'd made it clear that my approach wasn't welcome here. I had been humiliated. But in that humiliation, something had clicked. I wasn't just angry, I was motivated. As I sat down at my desk and started opening emails, a strange calm washed over me. I knew what I had to do next. I'd been offered a position at a rival firm the day before, and that offer was everything I needed to turn the page. Around mid-morning, Regina came by my desk. Her usual cold, calculating look was still there, but today it was more like a performance. She had clearly prepared for this, her next move. I could feel it coming. "Zelda, I need you to pull your client communication records," she said, standing in front of my desk, tapping her pen against her hand. "We're going to get rid of the fluff, okay? No more personal emails or notes. Just straight facts and figures." I stared at her, feeling my pulse quicken. It was as if she had completely disregarded everything I had done to make this company succeed. But in that moment, I realized that this was it, the last push. Regina was setting me up, trying to make me fail. And I wasn't going to let her. "I've already compiled them," I said, keeping my voice even. "I'll have everything ready for you in an hour." She nodded, satisfied, and walked off without a second glance. I sat there for a moment, watching her retreating figure, and took a slow, steady breath. I didn't know how long I'd be able to keep going in this toxic environment, but I knew one thing. I didn't have to stay here. I pulled out my phone and checked the email again. The offer was real. The offer was mine. But before I could respond, a knock at my office door interrupted my thoughts. I looked up to see Tim, the CEO, standing there with his usual warm, slightly uncomfortable smile. "Hey Zelda. Got a minute?" he asked, leaning against the doorframe. I gave him a polite nod. "Of course. What's up?" He stepped inside, sitting down across from me. He seemed uneasy, like he wasn't sure how to approach this conversation. I could already tell that whatever was coming wasn't going to be good. "I just wanted to check in. I know Regina's been pretty direct with you lately, but we're all on the same team here," Tim said, rubbing the back of his neck. "You're doing a great job. Really, we're all noticing the positive feedback from clients." His words sounded sincere, but there was something about the way he spoke that made it clear he wasn't really here to compliment me. He was trying to soften the blow. "I appreciate that, Tim," I replied, trying to mask the tension in my voice. "But I'm sure you're here for a reason. What's going on?" Tim hesitated, then looked around the office like he was making sure no one was listening. "I just wanted to tell you that we're going to do a bit of restructuring. Regina wants to move forward with the new system for client communication. But, well, the higher-ups aren't completely sold on it yet. We might be making some changes in the next few weeks." I nodded, the pieces falling into place. "You mean she's going to keep pushing me to change everything I've worked on?" Tim seemed uncomfortable, but he didn't back down. "I'm just saying, you're valuable to this company. And we don't want to lose you. Not over something like this." His words were vague, but the implication was clear. He was trying to keep me from making a decision. He didn't want me to walk away. I took a deep breath. I could feel the pull of the offer in my inbox, the promise of freedom. But part of me wanted to make Regina see that I could succeed without her, on my terms. I appreciate your concern, Tim, I said, my voice steady. But I've been thinking about my options. And honestly, I'm not sure if this is the right place for me anymore. Tim's expression faltered for just a second. You're not seriously considering leaving, are you? I looked him in the eye, my decision firm now. I think I have to. I've spent a lot of time building something here, but if I'm not being valued, then it's time for me to move on. Tim let out a sigh, his shoulders slumping slightly. Zelda, I really hope you reconsider. But if you do decide to go, well, we'll miss having you around. I gave him a small nod, a tight smile on my lips. Thanks, Tim. But I'm sure you'll be just fine without me. He stood up, looking like he was about to say something more, but stopped himself. I'll let you get back to work. Just keep me posted, okay? Will do, I said, and as he walked out, I felt a sense of finality settle over me. This was it. I was leaving. And it felt right. I opened my inbox and reread the email from the consulting firm one last time before I hit reply and typed my response. I accept, I wrote, tapping the screen with steady fingers. Please send me the official offer letter. As soon as I hit send, I leaned back in my chair, letting out a breath I didn't even realize I'd been holding. It was done. Regina's harsh words, her dismissal of my work, they didn't matter anymore. This was my chance to prove that empathy, relationships, and real human connection were the true drivers of success. And I wasn't going to let anyone, especially not Regina, stand in my way. I hadn't slept well the night before. My mind kept racing, running through every possible scenario. But as I pulled into the parking lot that morning, I knew there was no turning back. I sat in the car for a moment, staring at the building where I had spent the last year and a half. It was a sleek, modern structure, a perfect representation of the company's outward polish. But for me, it had started to feel like a cage. Regina's latest attack on my work had been the final straw. Taking a deep breath, I grabbed my things and stepped out. The office was quiet as usual. It was still early, but I could feel the weight of the day pressing down on me. The anticipation building. It was just a matter of time before I would make my move. When I walked into the building, the receptionist gave me a nod, but there was something in her eyes that made me pause. It was that look, that mix of sympathy and curiosity. Word must have already spread that something was off. I made my way to my desk. The same desk where I'd spent countless hours, poring over client feedback, crafting strategies, trying to make a difference. Now it felt like the final chapter of a book that had already been written. Regina's office door was closed, and I had no idea what she was doing in there. Maybe she was preparing for her next round of meetings. Maybe drafting another one of her dismissive memos about the company's future. But I didn't care anymore. Her power over me, over my work, was finished. I took a few minutes to gather everything. My personal items, files I wanted to keep, and a few notes I had jotted down during my time here. But what I didn't take with me were the things that had really mattered. The long hours, the energy I'd put into making connections with clients, the victories no one cared about. It was about 10 minutes before the team meeting when I saw Regina walking down the hallway, her high heels clicking loudly against the tile floor. She looked like she was about to tear into someone, her face a mask of frustration. Her eyes met mine briefly, but I could tell she didn't know what was coming. The room was filled with the usual mix of employees when I entered. There were a few scattered murmurs as I walked past their desks, but no one said anything. I was already mentally preparing for what I was about to do, and it took every ounce of my resolve to keep walking toward the conference room. The usual awkward silence fell over the room when I stepped inside, and as I shut the door behind me, I could feel every set of eyes on me. Regina, who was always the one to command attention, seemed a little off guard. She paused for a split second before clearing her throat, shifting her gaze toward me. Zelda, she began, her tone clipped. I hope you've made progress on. I cut her off before she could finish. Actually, Regina, I said, my voice steady, but there was an edge to it. I'm done. The room fell completely silent. I saw a few people glance at each other, unsure of what was happening. But I didn't let it stop me. I've accepted a new position with a rival firm. I continued, my voice stronger now. And I won't be returning after today. Regina's face faltered for a moment, and I could see her trying to recover her composure. What? She asked, almost disbelieving. Zelda, this is unexpected. You can't just. I raised a hand to stop her, feeling a strange sense of calm wash over me. I'm sorry, but I can't work under someone who doesn't value the things that really make a business succeed. You can keep your spreadsheets and your efficiency, but I've learned that real success comes from people, relationships, human connections. I looked around the room, meeting the eyes of a few colleagues who had been silent spectators. Some of them looked relieved, some surprised, but none of them seemed shocked. I had a feeling they had all seen it coming. I've tried, Regina. I really have. But I can't do this anymore. Not like this. Regina's eyes narrowed, and I could feel the tension in the room building. She opened her mouth to say something, probably a final attempt at a rebuttal, but I didn't give her the chance. I'm resigning, I said, voice firm. And I'm walking out the door with dignity, not defeat. I stood tall, making sure my words landed with the impact I wanted. I felt the weight of everything I had endured in that moment, but it wasn't burdening me anymore. It was freeing. I turned toward the door, and for a second, I thought I saw a flicker of something in Regina's eyes. Maybe it was guilt, maybe it was something else, but it didn't matter. I didn't look back. As I walked out of the room, I could hear the shuffle of footsteps behind me, but I didn't slow down. I didn't need to. This was my moment. I could feel the tension in the air shift, the unspoken energy in the room already beginning to fracture. Regina's grip on the team, on the company, was slipping. I gathered my things, walked to the front desk, and handed the receptionist my badge. There was a slight pause, but no words from her. She knew. She had seen it in my eyes. When I reached the parking lot, I took a deep breath, letting it out slowly. The air felt different out here. Lighter, almost like the weight of the office had been lifted from my shoulders. I climbed into my car and drove off, not looking back. I didn't need to. The future was waiting for me now, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like I was in control. I'd been in my new role for less than a week when the call started. At first, it was just a trickle, a message from one of the event planners I'd worked with, asking if I was available to consult on a new project. Then, a quick email from a client I'd worked closely with at Cresswell, saying they were eager to get my input on their upcoming event. I didn't even need to ask where these leads were coming from. It was clear. My clients had followed me. A few days later, when I checked my voicemail, I saw a handful of new messages. A corporate client from Cresswell, someone I'd helped orchestrate a high-stakes conference for, had left a message saying they needed me for another round of planning. The CEO, a notoriously hard person to please, had mentioned how pleased they were with the outcome of the last event. They wanted me involved, directly. I was still adjusting to my new role, the new office, the new challenges, but the validation was overwhelming. It didn't take long for the floodgates to open. Clients who had been skeptical of working with anyone other than me were now reaching out to ask if I'd be available to help. They didn't care that I wasn't at Cresswell anymore. They just wanted to work with me. One day, I was sitting at my new desk, a coffee in hand, when my phone buzzed with another notification. This one was different. It was from Sarah, one of the event coordinators at Cresswell, who had always been friendly, but never quite as plugged into the internal dynamics of the company. Hey Zelda, I just wanted to check in on you. I hope everything's going well at your new job. I wanted to let you know that several clients have already asked about you, and if you'd be willing to help with their events again. It's been really obvious that things have been shifting over at Cresswell since you left. Clients have been asking about you, and we both know they'll follow you if you go somewhere else. Let me know if I can pass your info along. The message hit me like a thunderclap. It wasn't just a few clients. It was multiple clients who were actively seeking me out. The best part was that Sarah was right. They weren't just following me because I'd been with Cresswell. They were following me because they valued what I brought to the table. The personal touch, the care, the attention I'd put into every event, no matter how small. I didn't hesitate. I sent her a quick reply. Thanks for the heads up, Sarah. I'd love to chat more about it when you have time. It's been a whirlwind, but I'm excited to keep doing what I do best. Within minutes, I had already received a message from another client asking if I could help with an upcoming gala. This time, the offer was even better. Bigger budget, more creative freedom. I knew that at Cresswell, I had been working on the margins, trying to push my ideas through a rigid framework that wasn't designed to give me the freedom I needed to thrive. Now it was different. These clients were eager for what I had to offer. But it didn't stop there. It wasn't just the old clients following me, it was the new ones, too. A week after I settled into my new role, I was invited to a networking event hosted by a competing firm. The room was filled with high-profile event planners, creative directors, and corporate executives. I knew some of them from previous events, but when they saw me, recognized me, they were eager to reconnect. "I hear you've left Cresswell," one of the directors said, smiling as she approached me. "I've heard nothing but good things about your work. Let's talk about collaborating on an event. I think we could really use someone like you." Within an hour, I had 3 different business cards in my pocket, all from people who had been following my work. They weren't just interested in me because of my reputation. They wanted me because they knew I could deliver results in a way that no one else could. And that's when I realized something crucial. It wasn't just my clients who followed me. It was the relationships I had built. My network wasn't about just events and clients. It was about people who trusted me, people who knew that no matter what happened, I would go the extra mile for them. Back at my new office, I was more than just an employee. I was building my own brand. As calls kept flooding in and my inbox filled with requests, I couldn't help but smile. The landscape had changed, and now, I was the one calling the shots. By the end of the week, I had secured 2 major clients, both of whom had worked with me at Cresswell. The offers were significantly better than anything I had ever earned in my previous role. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the fact that these clients had followed me not because they had to, but because they wanted to. When the phone rang again late one afternoon, I didn't even need to check the caller ID. I knew who it was. It was Bill from the Sterling Group. "Zelda," he said, his voice warm, "we've been thinking a lot about the direction we want to take with our next big event. We'd love for you to be involved. You've always had a way of making our clients feel seen, heard, and valued. Can we set up a time to talk?" I smiled. Everything I had worked for, everything I had fought for, was coming to fruition. And this was only the beginning. It didn't take long for word to spread. Cresswell Events, once a well-regarded name in the industry, was unraveling. The cracks had been there for months, but now, they were widening at an alarming rate. I'd been at my new firm for just under 2 months when I started hearing the whispers, both from clients and from industry contacts. Cresswell's major clients were walking away. Some of them were just requesting new event coordinators, but others were outright jumping ship, heading for firms where they could get the level of personalized service they had grown accustomed to working with me. It wasn't just the clients, though. The company's internal structure was beginning to crumble. Regina, whose iron grip on the company's direction had never wavered, was starting to lose control. I heard that she was scrambling to maintain what was left of her reputation, blaming the exodus of clients on market trends and economic shifts. But those excuses were starting to ring hollow. Everyone knew the truth. Industry insiders started whispering about Cresswell's looming layoffs. Talks of mergers and a potential sale to a competitor were gaining traction. The once efficient machine that had powered the company's success was now sputtering. One day, I received a call from Sarah, the event coordinator I had worked closely with at Cresswell. Her voice was strained, and she didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Zelda, I have no idea how to say this, but I think it's finally happening. Cresswell is falling apart. We just lost 2 of our biggest accounts, and there's talk of the company being bought out. I don't even know if I'll have a job in a month. I thought you should know." My stomach twisted. It was hard to feel sorry for them, especially when I knew how much they had tried to undermine everything I stood for. But at the same time, it felt surreal. This was the company I had worked for, the place I had poured so much of myself into, even when I was treated as expendable. I took a deep breath. What happened? What went wrong? "I think it's everything really," Sarah said, her voice thick with frustration. Regina's been running things with an iron fist for so long, but she never listened to anyone. Now everyone's jumping ship, and she's trying to save face. But no one's buying it anymore. Even the CEO is getting nervous. I leaned back in my chair, letting the weight of the conversation sink in. I'm sorry to hear that, Sarah. But you have options. You know that, right? You're talented. You could land something much better than that place. Sarah laughed bitterly. Maybe. But I've put so much time into Cresswell. And it feels like it's all going to waste. I don't know what to do next. I paused for a moment, thinking about the journey I had gone through. How many times had I doubted myself when I was stuck in that toxic environment, feeling like I was invisible? How many nights had I stayed awake, wondering if I was making the right choice? But now, I was building something real. Something that clients and colleagues respected. It had taken everything in me to walk away from Cresswell, but it was the best decision I had ever made. And now, it was time to help Sarah see that same possibility. You're going to be okay, Sarah, I said, my voice steady and reassuring. If Cresswell is falling apart, it's not your fault. You're not the one who didn't listen. But you can start fresh, and you can do it on your own terms. And I'll be here if you need any help. You've got this. A long silence passed between us, and then Sarah's voice softened. Thanks, Zelda. I needed to hear that. As I hung up the phone, I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. It wasn't easy watching everything I had worked for fall apart, but I knew it wasn't my responsibility anymore. Cresswell's failure wasn't on my shoulders. I had given it everything I could, and I had walked away with my head held high. But the most satisfying part? Watching Regina's control slip further and further from her grasp. She hadn't just lost me. She'd lost the one thing that had been holding the company together. And now the rest of the world was starting to see it too. I wasn't the only one who noticed. Industry sources had started sharing more alarming news about Cresswell's decline. Word on the street was that several key players were preparing to jump ship, and that could mean one thing. The company's future was in serious jeopardy. I sat back in my chair, taking a deep breath. It felt good to be on the other side of all of it. A couple of weeks later, the news broke. Cresswell Events was officially in crisis. Major contracts were evaporating, and the company's reputation, once built on strong client relationships, was now a shadow of what it had been. The layoffs began almost immediately, and the first round of corporate restructuring included a massive downsizing. The executives had clearly underestimated how much of the company's success had hinged on the personal connections I had built with clients. As much as I had tried to distance myself, it was hard not to feel vindicated. Cresswell's refusal to recognize the importance of human connection had sealed its fate. The cold, calculated approach to business, Regina's approach, hadn't just caused its downfall, it had handed me the opportunity to rise free from their grip. Meanwhile, my new firm was thriving. The clients who had followed me had brought more with them, and I was already working on multiple high-profile projects. Things were moving quickly, and for the first time in years, I felt in control. Cresswell, on the other hand, was floundering. Regina's insistence on efficiency had left her with nothing but empty spreadsheets. She had lost everything. And I was starting to win, in ways I never imagined possible. It had been a few months since I'd left Cresswell, and things were going better than I'd expected. My new position at the rival firm was everything I had hoped for: freedom, respect, and the ability to truly make an impact on the projects I worked on. The clients who followed me were loyal, and business was booming. I was no longer shackled to the rigid, stifling rules of Cresswell, where personal connections were dismissed as insignificant. Now I had the space to create, to nurture, to innovate. But I couldn't help but think about what was happening to Cresswell. News of the company's collapse was everywhere. It was hard to ignore. Every day seemed to bring another report about layoffs, mergers, and the eventual sell-off of their remaining assets. Then one morning, just as I was finishing a meeting with a new client, I received an unexpected email. The subject line read, "A request to reconnect." I stared at it for a moment, the name in the sender's field sending a chill down my spine. It was from Tim, the CEO of Cresswell. I had no idea why he was reaching out, but I clicked open the email anyway. His message was brief, but the words were heavy. Zelda, I hope this finds you well. I wanted to personally reach out and let you know that I have been following your success, and wanted to ask if you might be open to discussing a potential opportunity with Cresswell. I understand how things ended, but I think you know how much we valued your work and the contributions you made to our clients. If you are willing to discuss things further, I would love to connect. You've always been a valued member of this team. Let me know if you're available to chat. Best. Tim. ***. I blinked at the screen, reading the message again, trying to wrap my mind around it. This had to be a joke, right? After everything, Regina's public destruction of my work, the months of watching the company fall apart, and now Tim was asking if I wanted to come back? I let out a slow breath, trying to steady myself. Part of me felt anger rise to the surface. How could they be so tone-deaf? Did Tim really think I'd just come back after all of this? I had left that company behind for a reason, and nothing about their current state appealed to me in the slightest. But then a small part of me, the part that wanted to see everything come full circle, the part that craved justice, wanted to entertain the idea. Could I really go back? Could I rub it in their faces that I had flourished outside their toxic environment? I stared at the screen for a long time before I clicked reply. Thank you for reaching out. I appreciate your kind words, but after careful consideration, I don't think returning to Cresswell is the right move for me. I've found a place where my work is truly valued, and where I'm able to build something from the ground up. I wish you and the team the best in navigating these changes. Best regards, Zelda. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. I knew it was the right decision. But the next day, something unexpected happened. Tim called me. Zelda, I appreciate your honesty, he said, his voice softer than I had remembered. But before you make a final decision, I want to make sure you understand the full picture. Things aren't as dire as they seem. I'm being honest with you. Cresswell is still a valuable brand. We've gone through some rough patches, but there's a chance for us to rebuild. I'm offering you full creative control over client relations. We know you were the reason those clients stuck with us, and if we could get you back, well, we believe that could change everything. I leaned back in my chair, the offer hanging in the air between us. You want me to come back? I asked, trying to keep the disbelief from creeping into my voice. After everything that happened? Look, Zelda, Tim said, a sigh slipping through the line. We both know things didn't end well, but the company is still trying to find its footing, and we need someone who understands how to connect with clients on a deeper level. Someone who knows what truly makes this business work. You've always been that person, and frankly, we've been struggling without you. This could be a new beginning for both of us. I was quiet for a moment, letting his words settle. Was he really serious? So you're offering me the reins, I said, taking a breath. You want me to come back and fix the mess you've created? He didn't hesitate. Yes. I know it's a lot to ask, but we're offering you a chance to come back, with full autonomy, and the ability to shape the future of Cresswell's client relations the way you see fit. And of course, we're prepared to offer you a salary that reflects your value. I leaned forward, suddenly aware of the weight of his words. A salary that reflected my value? After all the years of being underpaid, underappreciated, and dismissed? I can't believe you're even asking me this, I said softly. You're offering me everything you refused to give me before. Just to save your company. What's in it for me? Tim's voice softened, as though he finally understood the weight of my response. What's in it for you? The chance to take control. The chance to prove your methods are the future of client relations, not just at Cresswell, but in the entire industry. The chance to leave a legacy. There was a long pause, and for the first time in the conversation, I felt the tug of something inside me. Something that wanted to prove myself, not just to Regina and Tim, but to everyone who had ever doubted me. But as quickly as the thought appeared, it was gone. I knew what I had to do. I'm sorry, Tim, I said, my voice steady. I've already found a place where I'm truly appreciated. I'm not interested in going back to a company that didn't value me when I was there. You're on your own now. I could hear him sigh on the other end of the phone. I understand. But you'll regret this, Zelda. You were always the best part of Cresswell. I smiled, leaning back in my chair. Maybe. But sometimes the best part of something is realizing you're better off without it. I hung up the phone, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Cresswell's offer was just the last piece of the puzzle, and with it, I had everything I needed to build my future. On my own terms. 2 years later, I was sitting in my office, gazing out at the city skyline through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The morning sun streamed in, casting long shadows across the room. But it was the view, the sprawling city, the endless possibilities, that truly held my attention. It had been a long road, but I had built something real, something lasting. I looked down at the framed photo on my desk. A picture from the first major event I'd organized under my own firm's banner. It had been a bold step forward, but the clients who had followed me from Cresswell had stuck by me. They trusted me, believed in the way I did business, and together, we had built something bigger than I ever imagined. I had left Cresswell behind, along with the toxic environment and the constant battles for respect, and I had built something that was truly my own. My firm had grown exponentially in the past 2 years, and the success of that first event was just the beginning. I ran my hand over the edge of the photo frame, thinking about how much had changed, about how far I'd come since that day I walked out of the office, making a decision that seemed like a risk at the time, but felt inevitable in hindsight. Back then, I had been uncertain, unsure if I was doing the right thing. Now, sitting in my own office, surrounded by the team I'd built and the clients I'd nurtured, it was clear that leaving had been the best decision of my life. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I knew by heart. A few rings later, a familiar voice answered. "Hey Zelda. How's it going?" Sarah's voice crackled through the receiver, warm and welcoming as always. "Hey Sarah," I said, a smile creeping across my face. "I was just thinking about you. I wanted to check in and see how everything's going with you." She laughed softly. "You're a good one, Zelda. Things are going great. I've been working on a few projects of my own, trying to get my own client base off the ground. It's been a little challenging, but, well, you know how it is. We're fighters." I could hear the pride in her voice, and I knew exactly how far she'd come. Sarah had left Cresswell just a few months after I did, and we'd both gone on to start our own ventures. She was still carving out her place, but her reputation was growing fast. And I was proud of her. "I know you're going to make it," I said, leaning back in my chair. "You've got the skills, Sarah. You always have." "Well, you definitely set the bar high for all of us," she said with a laugh. "I'll admit, I was a little hesitant when I first left Cresswell. It's hard to walk away from something you've invested so much into. But I can't say I regret it. Not anymore." I nodded to myself. It's tough. But I think when you finally realize that your value is about more than just the work you do, that's when everything starts to click. You were always the one who knew that, Zelda. You always made it about the people, not just the contracts. That's why your clients stuck with you. That's why we all stuck with you. I smiled, feeling a sense of pride settle in my chest. It's not just about the business. It's about how people feel, how they're treated. That's something I learned the hard way. She sighed contentedly on the other end of the line. "I'm so glad we both made it out of there. You know, I had my doubts about walking away from Cresswell, but seeing how you turn things around, seeing how you've built something sustainable, it really opened my eyes." I could hear the sincerity in her voice, and it hit me how far we both had come. We had started in the same place, faced the same toxic environment, and had both emerged stronger for it. In a way, we were both proof that the personal touch, the human connection, wasn't just a nice bonus to have in business. It was the foundation for lasting success. "Sarah, you've got this," I said, my voice firm and confident. "You're building something that's worth more than any paycheck or promotion. It's real. And that's something I don't think I would have learned if I hadn't left." The conversation turned to other things, clients, life, the challenges we were both facing. But the weight of that exchange hung with me. There was something powerful in realizing that both of us, after everything, had found a way to succeed by trusting our instincts, by honoring the connections we made along the way. I ended the call with Sarah, feeling lighter, more connected than ever. It wasn't just about business. It was about building something that lasted, something that stood the test of time. even when the odds were stacked against us. As the day wore on, I watched as my team worked diligently in the office. They weren't just colleagues. They were the foundation of what I was building. The atmosphere in my office was different from anything I had experienced at Cresswell. It wasn't about meeting quotas or hitting targets. It was about doing work that mattered. Every client we took on was more than a contract. They were a partnership. When the workday came to an end, I stood by the window, watching the city below. I thought about Cresswell, how far it had fallen since I left. Regina had lost everything. It was no surprise to me. She had clung to efficiency and control, trying to replace the heart of the business with cold, calculated numbers. In the end, people couldn't stay loyal to that. For a moment, I thought about sending her a message. Something simple. Thanks for the opportunity. I found my place. But I didn't. Instead, I turned away from the window, knowing that my success didn't need anyone's validation anymore. I had built this. With my hands. With my heart. And now the world could see it. The best revenge wasn't tearing someone else down. It was thriving, letting everything fall into place, and realizing that empathy, the thing they mocked as weakness, was in fact my greatest strength. It had been my foundation all along. And now it was my legacy.